This is George Dingledye, and I'm interviewing Russen Ansis Pudis at the Wabash Carnegie Public Library, and the date is 18th February 1985, and this is in the Vietnam Veterans portion of the oral history program. And Rusie, the first thing I'm going to ask you is tell me a little bit about your background and your parents and where they came from and your brothers and sisters and so forth.
Okay, my parents' nationality is Latvian. It's a little country up by Finland on the Baltic Sea, and they left Latvia during the war and fled to Germany, and I was born in Germany, in Nuremberg, and I was about 3 and a half when we came to the States, and it was my father and mother, and I have one sister who is 2 years older, and my mother's parents, the 6 of us, came to the States in 1950, and in a roundabout way we landed in New York City on a big ship, and went by train to North Carolina and stayed there 2 weeks, and then a Manchester College professor came down, and I remember it was one of those old woody type station wagons, and brought us to North Manchester. The reason we got up there, my dad's sister and her husband had located in North Manchester. He was a college professor in Latvia, and the Church of the Brethren had sponsored him, and so then we wound up there.
What was the date of your birth?
I was born August 18th, 1946.
And the name of the town?
Outside of Nuremberg, Fischbach.
Fischbach, yeah.
Okay. It was a displaced persons camp, a DP camp.
Yeah. Had you ever seen your grandparents, then your mother or your father's parents?
Well, my mother's parents came with us,
Oh.
so the 6 of us came together.
Right.
And I was pretty much raised, besides my parents, by my mother's parents. They lived with us.
Yeah.
They've since passed away, but they were pretty instrumental in helping raise me.
Did you ever see your father's parents?
My father's father died in Latvia when he was in his teens, and his mother, you had to have a sponsor to come to the States, and they finally located her. She was with his other sister in Sweden, and she came over here. They finally got her to come over here to live with my aunt and uncle, and she couldn't speak any English at all, and she was in her 80s when she flew over. And so I got to meet her and get to know her, and she passed away like when she was 92.
What town in Latvia were the families from?
The capital of Latvia is Riga, and it wasn't too far from there. My dad, well, you could compare him to a conservation officer over here. He was in charge of a forest area and lived on a farm, and he had a horse and did a lot of skiing, cross-country skiing. And, he was in charge of a big forest area.
Okay, then you grew up in Manchester, and tell me about that.
I grew up in North Manchester. I went to Manchester High School and graduated there in 1964. Played sports, played tennis, and I played in the high school band, and played a little baseball and football. And, graduated there in 1964 and went to Purdue down in West Lafayette to college, and I finished there in May of 1970, and I have a BS degree in industrial management.
Then what happened?
Well, the draft was in effect. I guess I stayed in college probably a little bit longer to try to avoid going to Vietnam any sooner than I had to, because I had a fairly low lottery number. I think it was like 142 or something like that, and so I was classified 1A, and shortly after I graduated from Purdue, I was drafted. I was drafted October 13th of 1970, and in fact, before I got drafted, a friend of mine, David Ayers from North Manchester, he also had about the same lottery number. He and I decided we might fare better in the military if we enlisted, and so we got real brave one day and went to Fort Wayne and talked to the Marine recruiter and thought we'd enlist on the buddy plan, and the next day we kind of changed our minds and thought, well, we just take our chances and get drafted and just go from there. So we left Wabash October 13th. I think like 4:30 in the morning we had to be down here, and went to Indianapolis and went through our medical and physical exams there, and then got on the bus and went on to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and went through basic training there. And,
Infantry?
well, the basic training part, it was the same for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then your last week, then they would reassign you for your, they call it AIT, for your advanced individual training. And most everyone was hoping they would not get infantry, and I was lucky enough. I got assigned to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and my MOS, their military occupational specialty, was 82B40, which is construction surveying. And so I went to, from basic training, I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, to that's the home of the engineers. It's at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, just south of Washington, D.C., close to Mount Vernon. And I wound up spending 6 months there. They had an initial phase of their schooling there, and then they had an advanced phase. And if you did well enough in school there, then they selected you to go into the second portion of it. And part of that was the NCO candidate school. And I chose not to go to officer candidate school because it meant another year, and I just thought I wanted to spend 2 years instead of 3. So I went to the second portion. Like I said, when I went into that, I was automatically specialist 4th class, E4, and then when I graduated, I was E5. So about 8 months in my total tour of duty so far, I was already Sergeant E5, which is making rank pretty fast, but it was kind of almost automatic. And it was pretty interesting. And at Fort Belvoir, the West Point prep school was there, and while there, I even made Soldier of the Month at Fort Belvoir, believe it or not. Got a little trophy at home for that. And I graduated number 1 in my class. There were 15 of us, and a lot of my training involved surveying roads and bridges, and just going out in the bush and plotting elevations and so forth, and mapping and doing land contours. And there were 15 of us that graduated in the advanced portion of that, and 13 of us received orders for Vietnam. And most of us didn't really want to go. We didn't know what to expect, but we knew we were going. The one fellow who didn't go, he was retained at Fort Belvoir as an instructor there, and because he was married, and the other one had a brother in Vietnam, so at that time you didn't have to go if you had relations. And so I had about, I think, a 30-day leave before I had to go to Vietnam. And I think it was, let's see, in August. Well, I left for Vietnam August the 13th of, would have been 71.
Is that a Friday?
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th.
But I had to go from my home after my 30-day leave. I went to Chicago and then caught a plane to Fort Lewis, Washington. And then we waited there at Fort Lewis and until we got manifested for Vietnam. And there were 13 of us. Like I said earlier, there were 13 of us in my class who were assigned to Vietnam, and I happened to be the last one manifested, and I happened to leave on Friday the 13th, and I also got drafted on the 13th. So it's kind of a coincidence. I didn't know if I'd be lucky or not, but I guess I turned out to be fairly lucky. And
Let's test the tape. There we are. Okay, so we're leaving on the 13th of Vietnam.
Okay,
and what airline is hauling you over and so forth? How many's on the plane? And
gosh, I can't remember. It was I think it was like World Airlines. It was like just like a commercial jetliner, but they seemed to pack more seats in there than the average because I think they wanted to get as many on as possible. You were pretty well cramped, not much leg room. I assume there were over 200 on the plane. I can't. Some of the things just seem like it happened, and you don't remember that much. But we left Fort Lewis and flew to Anchorage, Alaska. Landed there for refueling and a brief stop, and then we went on to Yokota, Japan, and then on to Cam Bay. And really didn't know exactly what to expect in Vietnam, but I didn't feel like we were briefed that much. I guess because I was possibly in an engineer company, they probably didn't expect that much action to be happening. The war was kind of winding down at that time too, I think. But we landed in Cam Bay, and I remember it was really sandy. It was almost like a desert type condition, and we were assigned barracks there, nothing permanent. It seemed like every day or so we were moved to a different bunk, and then a couple times a day you had roll call, and you waited to be reassigned somewhere within Vietnam.
were they shelling the base or anything?
You could hear a lot of shelling going on in the distance and so forth, and you heard rumors of shells coming in and so people getting killed and so forth, but I didn't see that much. But you're just always prepared. You just didn't know what to expect. I remember a USO tent there. It was kind of like a big parachute was flying above it. And, we just kind of spent a lot of time there playing cards and whatever. And like I said, we had roll call about every day, and then everyone was hoping they wouldn't get sent up to Phu Bai, which was close to the demilitarized zone. Hoping to get sent, in safer areas of Vietnam. But I was assigned to Da Nang, which is north of Cam Bay, and this was after about a week in Cam Bay. And so I left Cam Bay and I flew to Da Nang, and then from there I was reassigned down to Chu Lai, which is about 50 miles south of Da Nang, and it's right on the South China Sea. It was an engineer base there, and it's kind of reminded me a lot of, you see the MASH TV show TV program. It kind of reminded me of that. And in fact, when I went to Chu Lai, they kind of gave me a choice whether to stay there or be assigned inland to this other company, and so I kind of chose to stick close to the water. I guess I felt a little safer doing that. They didn't need any surveyors there, and it's just kind of funny. They spent 6 months training me to be a construction surveyor, and then when I got there, they didn't really need any at that time. So they kind of looked at what other skills you had and what openings they had, and just kind of put you here and there. And I had a college degree and I could type, and so they needed a company clerk in this one light equipment engineer company, and so they assigned me there. And it just so happened the present company clerk that was there was going on a leave, 30-day leave, about 2 weeks after I got there. So I just got enough training to know how to do the daily reports and type some of the orders and so forth. And I was kind of in charge of running the company clerk duties. And we had a black first sergeant. His name was Willie C. Nesbitt, and he was a pretty nice guy. He kind of liked me, and we struck it off pretty good. And it was about his third tour of duty, so what I gathered, he was he was pretty strict the first couple times around, but I think they have to be kind of cautious. If they're too strict with some of those fellows over there, some of them, stories I heard, they didn't fare too well, because some of the fellows seemed like they might have gotten drugged up, and I heard of a lot of officers and first sergeants getting done away with by their own men, so anyway, I was a company clerk and getting along pretty well, and like I said, the first sergeant kind of liked me, and the fellow who was running the enlisted men's club at Chu Lai got into some problems. I forget what it was. Anyway, the first sergeant asked me if I wanted to run the enlisted men's club also, and I said sure. So it paid me a little extra a month to do that, and it was a small club. Had about 3 Vietnamese gals working there as waitresses, and so I did that at night and made a little extra money, and it passed the time, and I got quite a few benefits besides, what I would have had. And well, so I don't know where you want to go from here.
Well,
but
just talk about the enlisted men's club and about how you had to requisition supplies and what happened.
We had to, like I said, I got paid a little extra each month for doing that, and I was in charge of turning in the payroll and so forth for the Vietnamese waitresses, and we had a kind of a main supply area, a warehouse that we had to go to pick it up, and just kind of keep a running inventory of the supplies, the pop and the beer and the whiskey and the liquors and so forth. And the club had every Saturday night we had a band there of some type, mainly Japanese or Korean, and once in a while you get an Australian band, and it was kind of interesting to run it, and I got to know quite a few of the fellows, and one thing they I've kind of forgotten about until now. When I first got at Chu Lai, like I said, I made rank pretty fast, and it seemed like some of the fellows didn't accept me too well. They were either a little suspicious or what, because I guess there had been guys who were actually, I think it was CID or undercover type, drug enforcers or whatever, just to see what the situation was. And first sergeant kind of was partial to me, and he let me grow my hair a little longer or whatever, and it just seemed like there was a little friction there of some sort. They didn't know quite what to think. Drugs were kind of a problem there. I remember we had quite a few roll calls when they come in with the drug dogs, and just take one guy and go to his pooch and just search the place, and they confiscated a lot of marijuana and a lot of heroin and so forth. But during those type of inspections, they really didn't press charges, because I don't know if it was military laws didn't permit them, unless they specifically were going after a specific person for something. If it was just an overall search, they couldn't really press charges on anybody.
So all he lost was the drugs.
That's about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the drugs, the marijuana and so forth, was pretty open. In fact, they didn't seem to make a lot of bones about the marijuana. They were more concerned about the more potent drugs and so forth.
Was it cheap? Must have been, and excessive.
I'd kind of been through a little drug phase, I shouldn't say a drug phase, kind of I smoked some marijuana when I was in college, and I had kind of a bad experience, so I kind of knew what it was, and I didn't really have that much to do with it. In fact, I don't think I've ever even bought any, what I can think back, but it was readily available and not that expensive at all, I know. And, we had little hooches there at Chu Lai. there were probably about 4 or 5 guys that had their own rooms per hooch. And you can fix it up about any way you wanted to. And then when I got the enlisted men's club, I had my own room down there and my own shower, and I was all set. It seemed like, but things were fairly primitive there. There, no flush toilets, nothing like that.
What was the objective of the engineering company that you were with?
Okay, the company I was with was the 137th Engineer Company, Light Equipment, and mainly just constructing roads, airfields, and bridges and so forth. Mainly roads at that time. I never really got out in the field there. I was just more or less back at the base camp. And,
but they would go out and do this stuff?
Yeah, a lot of fellows would go out and be reassigned, out in the field and so forth. It seemed like the longer they stayed out, the rougher they'd come back. It's kind of the thing to do was not polish your boots. And some of those guys were kind of pretty rough when they came back. What was the commander, and where did he stay, and what did he do? Did he bounce around? I had a captain who was the engineer, which I called the American, I think, at my parole.
You were attacked on
they were.
Were you ever mortared? There was any infill by
Vietnam that I was involved. You'd hear sneaking and damage. You'd always going off some flare at night. Some precaution. When I first was there, we could beach 3 times. You can go down there. And it seemed like once I was there, they put barbed wire on the beaches and so forth. And there's talk of some infiltrators and so forth.
Well, you stay. You're running enlisted Miss Love, and time you're acting as company clerk for this engineering company. And what else? What other actions going on?
Well, we had a typhoon that hit Chu Lai while I was there. One morning we woke up. We really didn't have much warning of it. Just know I've never seen it rain quite so hard and the wind blow so hard, and the typhoon directly hit, and just completed I'd say about 90% things there, and tore down all the power lines. About 2 weeks, we didn't have any power, electricity, whatever, and wheat rations, no water at all. It was kind of scary then. It was bad enough being over there, but then being in darkness at night, it was kind of doubly so. And then few guys were killed during that typhoon. I know back home they really wrote it up as really pretty severe. And my parents were kind of worried because they hadn't heard from them for a couple of weeks before that. So, it was quite an experience. Because in the morning it was raining real hard and the wind was blowing, and you could see the roofs just peeling off and the buildings just being picked up and just splintered. And then a few hours later, around noon, it got real calm and the sun came out, and then just shortly thereafter, the wind just totally reversed. We were in the eye of the typhoon, and it came back the other way, the same deal. And then from Chu Lai, I was there approximately 6 months, and we turned the base over to the South Vietnamese. So we kind of wound things down there, and I was reassigned from there down to Long Binh, which is down by Saigon. And then we kind of packed things up, and I went by truck convoy up to Da Nang. And I thought it was kind of funny, but no one was issued any weapons of any kind. So I don't know what would have happened if we would have been under attack or whatever. But it was about 60 miles. Through some little villages, and
no weapons at all? No sidearms? Nothing?
No, some of the sergeants had
45s or carbines or something.
Some of the the higher ranking people did, but no.
You guys had nothing?
No, not really. And really, we didn't. Unless you're out in the field back in Chu Lai, we really didn't carry anything with us. Speak of. Once in a while, you had some things reassigned when you had to pull guard duty or something like that. But it wasn't like you were carrying a weapon all the time.
Mm-hmm.
which is a little different than probably normally think.
So the company moves to Da Nang, and
So we moved to Da Nang, and then went by plane, made a few stops in Nha Trang and a few other stops, and then down to Long Binh, which is outside of Saigon. And from there, I had to go through kind of the reassignment phase again, and they were going to send me out in the field then to survey. And I said, well, I've been a company clerk for 6 months, and I can type and so forth, and sure you don't need anybody here at group headquarters. Well, they kind of checked their records, and they wound up reassigning me to the personnel division of the headquarters company of the 159th Engineer Group. So I had a pretty good job. I was there in personnel, and Long Binh is pretty civilized. There's street lights and paved roads and swimming pools, and I even had a tennis court in my company area. And, my offices I worked in were air conditioned and so forth, and so I had it pretty good there. And got to go into Saigon a few times to pick up some personnel who were moving in, and we had a helicopter squadron attached to our group, and like weekend leaves and so forth, you could catch a ride with some of those fellows. And we flew down to Vung Tau on a kind of an in-country weekend R&R, and which is right on the South China Sea, and it's a French built city. There's some nice hotels there, and French, Vietnamese gals, and you wouldn't think a war was going on spending
a couple
time
hundred
there.
miles away, yeah.
And so had some good experiences in Long Binh. And while I was at Long Binh in group headquarters, I found out about this circuitous travel, they called it, and it was designed for the fellows who were reassigned to Vietnam from Germany, who would go back and pick up their wives or belongings or whatever, and then get discharged back in the eastern side of the United States. Well, where I worked, it was I applied for it, and my personnel officer okayed it, and one other person had to okay it, and I was all set to, instead of leaving Vietnam and coming back and getting discharged in California, I went around the other way and to Frankfurt, Germany, and then back to Fort Belvoir. I might interject that at Christmas time, which was about shortly after I got to Long Binh, they were letting people go home for Christmas, and instead of taking my R&R in Australia like I planned to, I decided to go to come home for Christmas and New Year's. And, I'll never forget the trip. We left Saigon and flew to Yokota, Japan, and there was a long delay there. In fact, I think they went through a drug inspection there. They had the dogs and so forth. And then from there, we were supposed to fly to Anchorage, Alaska, and on to Chicago. But they had bad weather in Anchorage, so we flew from Yokota, Japan to Wake Island. It's a tiny little island in the middle of the Pacific. And then from there, we flew to Honolulu, Hawaii, and went through a baggage inspection there. And then we flew from Honolulu to Oakland, California. And Santa Claus greeted us there. But everybody by that time was too tired to even think about Santa Claus. And then on to Chicago. And I think the total trip we were on the plane for about 36 hours. And then I spent 2 weeks at home over Christmas and New Year's, and I had to go back to Long Binh. But this, getting back to the circuitous travel, I applied for it, and it was okay.
So we're talking about security
travel. And
cutting your own orders.
well, yeah, that was part of my job, was to cut the orders and for people who were getting discharged and reassigned and so forth. So I cut my own orders, and I left. I could have been discharged out of the Army a month earlier, but I chose to do this, and looking back, I'm glad I did. I left Long Binh and went to Camp Alpha there in Saigon, outside of Saigon, and left there on a mass flight. They called it a mass flight. And these flights went around the world about every week, and they hit different embassies and capitals and dropped off diplomats and mail and picked up military personnel. If they had space available on these flights, then guys like myself could get on. And so, in fact, I traveled in civilian clothes instead of in military uniform. So I got on that flight and left Vietnam and flew to Bangkok, Thailand, and we refueled there, and then went on to New Delhi, India, and we spent the night in New Delhi, and it's kind of interesting, I can't even think of the word, when they searched you for your, well, we actually got frisked. I mean, I've never been frisked so much at all, because we were spending the night there, and they just bodily searched everyone who was getting off the plane. We had to leave our baggage, except for
Immigration, did you say?
Right.
Immigration.
Yeah.
So these were the Indians who were doing it?
Yes, in New Delhi. And then outside the airport, they had all these little tour guides and so forth who were wanting to take you to the motel and sell you package deals to spend the night and so forth. So we all pretty much stuck together, and most of us went to one hotel. And then from there we had a tour of New Delhi and Old Delhi, and about 5 Delhis.
Yeah.
And had a meal out in an Indian restaurant, and it was interesting. I don't think I'd want to wander off alone in India. But, and then the next day we flew on to Karachi, Pakistan, and refueled there, and went on to Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. And from there we flew on to Torrejon, Spain, but we couldn't go across the Arab countries. We had to fly kind of a roundabout way. It was about twice as far as it should have been. And in Torrejon, outside of Madrid, I got off the plane there and spent a few days in Madrid, and I was trying to see as much of the country as I could, and I had to get up to Frankfurt, Germany. So we went back to the air base to Torrejon and tried to catch another flight. And there was not one going directly to Frankfurt. We had to, I caught one that went to Adana, Turkey, and spent the night in Adana, and then on to Athens, Greece the next day, and to Frankfurt, Germany. And then I left some luggage in Frankfurt, and kind of stuff out on my own. I had a 30-day delay en route, 30-day leave, and I just traveled around Europe for 30 days. It's quite a few countries. Traveled by train, went to Germany, down from Frankfurt to Munich to Garmisch, and on to Innsbruck, Austria, and to Zurich, Switzerland, and to Paris. Spent about 5 days in Paris. And then went by train to London, took the hovercraft across the Channel, and spent another 4 or 5 days in London, and on to Amsterdam, and to Copenhagen. And I visited my aunt in Hässleholm, Sweden, in the southern part of Sweden. It's my dad's sister, the one I mentioned, his mother lived with before she came to the States. And I'd never met her, and she'd never met me, so she didn't even know I was coming. I just bought a bouquet of flowers and just knocked on the door, and there weren't too many people that spoke Latvian except myself, and so she was pretty shocked. So I was glad to see her because a few years later she died, and so from there I worked my way back to Frankfurt and flew back to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and was discharged. I think it was May 5th of '72.
What did you do then?
After I was discharged, my degrees in industrial management, I took a few weeks off and didn't do much of anything, and I was searching for employment. I interviewed a few companies and trying to get into industry, but nothing that interesting was available, and a job came along with an insurance company, Farm Bureau Insurance, so I thought, well, I'll take that, and I wound up doing that for 3 years, and in Wabash County, at North Ansis, my hometown. They opened an office there, and so I was an insurance agent there. I did that for 3 years until I opened my own clothing store, which I had for a little over 9 years.
Were you exposed at all to Agent Orange? Did you know that?
Not that I specifically know of. I recall some people, saying that they had some kind of a chemical that killed vegetation that they were spraying and so forth. I don't really necessarily remember it being called Agent Orange at that time or anything, but I know that they had some chemicals that they were using to kill vegetation. So, it's hard to say if
You've seen it then? You've seen the dead trees and the dead forest?
I remember seeing a little, yeah. But as far as being exposed, I don't know. I never didn't associate it at the time.
Well, coming out of a southern community, a pacifist, I think we both agree that Santos is rather pacifist oriented, correct? Were you conscious of any protests or anything while you were in the Army, or before you went to the Army, or while you were to the
There was a big anti-Vietnam movement going on. In fact, this gal I was dating, she didn't want me to go, and I know there were a lot of organizations, even guys in the military, when I was out at Fort Belvoir, who were, this was close to Washington, D.C., so they had organizations you could go to, and they would teach you how to, inform you how to try to avoid Vietnam, and encourage you maybe to go to Canada and so forth. But
this wasn't in the military, this was outside the military.
Well, there were a lot of military fellows involved in this kind of underground type
Oh,
thing.
really?
Oh, yeah.
And were you swayed at all by this? Or?
No, I was reluctant to go to Vietnam. I really didn't want to, but there was no way I would have gone to Canada or anything like that. No, I wanted to serve in the military, and I just wasn't that gung-ho to go to Vietnam. Looking back, it was a good experience. I know a lot of fellows can't say that, but I learned a lot. And maybe the hardest part on the whole thing at that time was I was probably a little older than some of the fellows. I was 22 when I went, and a lot of them, especially out of high school, and people take orders and get used to the military part of life at that age, more so than if you were set in your ways and a little independence about it.
What were your impressions of black soldiers that you were seeing in there?
I had some good friends. This one fellow that was in basic training with me, we were pretty good friends, and another one that was in AIT was a good friend, and had a lot of camps with him together. It seemed like at Chu Lai, where I was, and also at Long Binh, there weren't that many of them there that I was exposed to. It seemed like if they were by themselves, or just one or two of them, it seemed like the relations would be a lot better. If you got a whole group of them, it seemed like they were pretty well stuck together, and they were pretty radical. But overall, I didn't have that much problem with it. I I remember there every time that the Black Brothers met, they had their big hand jive sessions going on. Some of them staying there about 5 minutes, introducing themselves or whatever, knocking hands and fists and whatever. And it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. What do you think that the Vietnamese, now that they're united and it's communist, obviously, I was watching the program where the defense ministers in Vietnam were saying on television the other night that if the Americans were so interested in Vietnam and knocking everybody around in the US, why don't we throw something in the pot, finish the reparations for Vietnam? What's your thinking now?
Well, while I was there, I guess I thought differently. I thought I was there for a purpose, and I thought we should have been there, and should have been defending the threat of communism and so forth. But I guess looking back on how they handled it, I don't think that they really accomplished much of anything. It was just nobody had a free hand to really. To fight a war the way, there's a rule of fighting a war. I don't think it was done to win anything. I don't really know what it accomplished. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That country just seems like it's been torn by war for so many years. I don't know. I really don't know. But,
have you had any desire to see the monument in Russia?
Yeah, I think so. I spent, like I said, I was there close to 6 months. In fact, for the time I lived right in Washington, D.C., and commuted to Fort Belvoir, and I saw.
It must be interesting.
Yeah.
The monument must be interesting. There's no doubt about it.
I saw Kennedy's grave while I was there, and I saw most of the sites. Washington is an interesting place, and I would like to see the monument.
The wall is interesting. Have you ever been interested in any veterans organizations or Vietnam or anything nuclear?
Well, I belong to the American Legion, and I belong to the VFW.
Yeah.
I'm not very active. I just support by belonging. Once in a while, I do participate in something. I've been approached recently about starting a veterans organization here, which I think would be a good thing. Some of the fellows do need some rap sessions, if you want to call it that, and just to discuss their experiences and be able to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
The first meeting Saturday, I don't know if it materialized, and I didn't hear much about it. But as far as being involved in anything, to any extent,
did that bother you that there was a public, not only a public indifference, but it actually almost bordered on hostility when you got home, or you didn't care?
Well, I don't know. I was just glad to get home. My friends and relatives, welcomed me home, and it wasn't. I guess it didn't really make that much difference to me, because it wasn't like a whole group of us were coming home or whatever. I just go on for a while, and when I came home, everyone, it was nice to me as they ever were. So I guess I didn't really. I think that's part of a lot of people kind of make their own assumptions on and make their own problems and so forth. I guess I can't really reflect some of the fellows who were involved in a lot of the fighting and who had a lot of more of emotional stress than say I, because I think I had a fairly good tour of duty, and I really don't have that many complaints.
Yeah. Do you think it has any effect on your life since then, on your personal life, or not? Do you think things that have happened would have happened had you not gone, or would they have, you think?
I think it was an excellent experience for me. I think it helped me become more independent and more, just getting away from home and the experiences I learned. I got a chance to travel, clear around the world, which I doubt if I'll ever get to do again, especially a military experience. But, I think overall I'd probably do it again. Go in the military and do what I did to.
You say it was a positive experience rather than a negative experience. I think quite a few have that attitude. What did you think the opinion was? I just had a little answer. What was the opinion when you gave your engineering facility over to the South Vietnamese? What was the feeling at that time? Did they make it or they couldn't make it?
Well, most of the fellows at that time, they didn't have that much time left in the service, so they were kind of ready to go home anyway. A lot of them did go home from Chu Lai. If you only had a couple months left, instead of reassigning in the country, they were being sent home and discharged. And, I really didn't see any animosity or anything toward turning over to the Vietnamese. Most of them days were destroyed by the typhoon anyway.
They weren't getting much, yeah?
No, not really.
What feeling, did they have a feeling that these people can make it or they can't make it? We have a funny attitude, I think, about it seems to be our allies. We have a funny attitude that they can't do it as well as we do. And that's always true. In World War II, we didn't think our allies could do it as well as we do, and so forth.
Well, I don't know if they really wanted to do it. That's the whole feeling that I get. I don't know if the Vietnamese really knew exactly what they were even wanting. I think it was just kind of at our mercy, more or less, and it seemed like the Americans kind of did what they wanted to do, and it really didn't seem like they had much say so. I don't know.
Anything else that is interesting or happened, funny or tragic, or that you can, you think would be of interest to someone reading it 100 years from now? Well, I know your parents were glad to see you.
Yeah, my parents were glad to see me get back and so forth. I came home for the death. I came home for Christmas and New Year's. The plane was delayed so long that I had a hard time catching the flight from Chicago to Fort Wayne, and so they decided to drive up to Chicago and get me, which they did. And I didn't even realize they were coming up. There was some snowstorms, and the planes were grounded.
Well, I think that you and I have covered just about everything. Do you ever have a nostalgia for war?
Oh, I don't have a nostalgia for war. Parts of Vietnam are beautiful. I kind of enjoyed some time, possibly, if things were safe over there, to possibly visit.
Mm-hmm.
That country has so many different types of terrain, it's just unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
You have the mountains, you have the jungle, and the desert type, and the rice paddies, and it's just some of the cities along the coast are just gorgeous.
Too bad they had to fight a war. Rusie, thank you very much for this interview, and this is George Dingelbauer.